They correspond with what I'm going to be doing here on the PowerPoint, so you can either have the option of filling those in or engaging here. There's going to be some sort of activities embedded within this to try to break it up and facilitate some conversation and discussion about what we're going to be talking about. This is lesson 6 in what we've been doing here this summer on this class, Come Let Us Reason Together, Learning to Love God with All Thy Mind. And what we're going to be looking at this morning is understanding the nature of statements. Okay? Now, how many of you have thought to yourself at some point in the first 5 lessons, and it's okay for you to answer this out loud, that some of what we're talking about seems somewhat obvious? Okay, there's an element to that that's true, right? Like there's an element to what we've been talking about that seems somewhat obvious. The problem is that what seems to be obvious to some never occurs to others, right? And so, and we're trying to bring some structure and some organization around this thinking. And so you kind of have to go all the way back to the beginning and then sort of build up some concepts, etc. It's almost like school. So when you enter school in kindergarten, what kinds of things do they teach you? Your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, colors, shapes, stuff like that, right? And then at least in theory, as you get older and you progress through school, the content is supposed to get more difficult, right? So if you give a kindergartner or first grader algebra, are they going to have any idea what to do? And so that's kind of the same thing here, right? So what we're going to be talking about today is understanding the nature of statements. So the Cubs beat the Tigers yesterday. Is that a statement?
Yes.
That's a statement. Now, we're going to look at why that's a statement. What about, well, I'll give something away if I ask that right now, so I'm going to hold off on that, okay? So what we want to look at today again is the understanding the nature of statements. Now, people make statements all the time. It's kind of like what we did a couple weeks back with definitions. Do people have their own definitions for things sometimes? And I said that one of the things that you absolutely have to do is, if you're engaging in a conversation with somebody, is you have to get them to define their terms, right? Because if they don't define their terms and you're having a conversation, you might not be talking about the same thing, and so that's important. Well, people make statements all the time. Sometimes they're statements, sometimes they're not, and we need to be able to identify when someone's making a statement, when they're not, and when what they're saying is nonsense, okay? So, statements, true or false, is where we want to start here. So, point number 1 is basically a statement or a definition of what a statement is. A statement is a particular kind of sentence. Okay? It's a sentence that brings a message that can be said to be either true or false. Okay? So, back to what I said a moment ago. The Cubs beat the Tigers yesterday. Is that a statement? It's a statement, right? You can look it up, you can test whether or not that's a true statement or whether that statement is what? False. It happens to be true. The day before on Friday, the Tigers beat the Cubs. That would also be a true statement because, so a statement is a particular kind of sentence that brings a message that can said to be either true or false. And anything in brackets here at the end is just the page number that I'm getting this from off the textbook that we're using. Okay? So let's look at a couple examples here. Is this a true statement? The Apostle Paul wrote the book of Galatians. Go look at Galatians. Get Galatians chapter 1. We're going to look at Galatians chapter 1, verse 1, and see if that seems to make sense as a true statement. Galatians 1:1. The first word of the verse, Paul, an apostle, not of men, neither by man, but by Jesus Christ, and God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brethren which are with me unto the churches of Galatia. So is it the Bible's claim that Paul wrote the book of Galatians? So would we say that's a true statement? Okay? Here's a false statement. The Apostle Paul wrote the book of Isaiah. Is it true that he wrote Galatians?
Yes.
Yes, that's true. Is it true that he wrote Isaiah?
No.
No. So back to the definition. A statement that is a particular kind of sentence that brings a message that can be said to either be true or false. This sentence, the Apostle Paul wrote the book of Galatians, is true. This sentence, the Apostle Paul wrote the book of Isaiah, is not true. Therefore, we would say it's what?
False.
False, right? So way back to things that we've already dealt with. Can either of these statements be true and false at the same time? No, why not? What rules of logic would that violate? It would violate non-contradiction, and it would violate excluded middle, right? So it would be a violation of the basic laws of logic that we've already discussed, okay? So in evaluating, next point, so in evaluating these statements, we should be looking for what we would call their truth value. What is their truth value as a statement? Okay? There is no truth value in the second statement because Paul did not write Isaiah. There is truth value in the first statement because Paul did write the book of Galatians. Okay? So you think about, this is one way I think about this. Anytime you go to this, I'm going to talk as an economist now for a second. Okay? Anytime you go to the store and you buy something, it could be a pack of gum, and let's say you pay $1.50 for it just to keep it easy, right? Are you saying, thinking about that in pure economic terms, an economist would say that you perceive the value that you're going to get out of the gum to be worth $1.50 that you have to pay to obtain what? The gum, right? So does the gum have an economic value to it in your mind and in your thinking for why you want to buy it? Okay? Well, the same thing is true with statements, right? They have value to them. And their value to them, or the currency, is whether or not they're what? True. Whether or not they're accurate, right? So as we evaluate statements, using this definition, a sentence where you can evaluate whether they're true or false, we're looking for the truth value of what is being said. So put another way, if a sentence has no truth value, then it is not a statement at all. If it has no truth value, it's not a statement at all. Now, why would that be? If there's no truth value, why is it not a statement? That's where you're going to have to kind of...
It's just fiction. You tell one story then.
Okay? So, let me give you an example. 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's not a written out sentence, okay? Is it true? No, it's not true. So what's the real answer here? It's 4, right? So does the statement 2 plus 2 equals 5 have any truth value? So is it a valid statement then? Not really. Okay, because it's false, right? So if we're evaluating statements based upon their truth value, then for something to be a legitimate, real statement, it has to be what? It has to be true. So can people make false statements all the time? So let me just mess with you just a bit here if I could. Can you know something that's false? Think about it. Can you know something that's false? Can I know 2 plus 2 equals 5?
Yes.
Okay, but that's not what I said. Can I know something that's false?
You can know 2 plus 2 isn't 5.
So I can know of something that's false, but I can't truly know something that's what? False, because it's not what? True. So can I know that 2 plus 2 equaling 5 is false? But I can't know 2 plus 2 equals 5 because it doesn't equal 5. It doesn't equal 5. It equals what? 4. So I can know of things that are false, but in order for me to have knowledge, the things that I know have to be what? True. Can I believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5? Sure. I can believe it all I want till the cows come home. But does just believing it equals 5 make it true? No. Is everybody following what I'm saying here, right? So when we think about statements, we need to evaluate them based upon their truth value. So does everybody have any comments or questions before we move on?
That works with math, but what about most things are opinions or statements of...
Well, we're going to get to that, okay? Because for example, I could say, it's warm in here right now.
And it's relative.
Because I'm hot.
Yeah.
Like, temperature hot, not other kinds of hot. I'm warm right now, okay? So for me, I'm hot. Now somebody else might be sitting here saying what?
I'm cold.
I'm cold. So statements like that, that's just a statement of the way I perceive my temperature to be at the moment, right? It's not a statement claiming some sort of fact, right? So it might be true that I am feeling warm, and it might be true that somebody else is feeling cold, but that doesn't make relativism true, right? It just is a statement of how one person is feeling versus another person. We'll get to that in a minute. So non-statements then, okay? So I want you to consider the following non-statements. So a non-statement would be a negation of what we just said, right? So let's just make sure we understand this. So a statement, just to refresh your memory, is a sentence that brings a message that could be said to be either true or what? False. Okay? So these examples here, these are non-statements. Who wrote the book of 1 Timothy? And husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So I want you to think and talk to the person next to you. Why would these be non-statements? Okay? Why would they be non-statements? Think about them carefully. Discuss them for a minute. If you want to jot something there on the line, go ahead. Why do you think these are not statements? Quick, talk to each other for a second. Go. All right, so let's talk about the first one. Who wrote the book of 1 Timothy? Why is that not a statement?
It's a question.
Okay, it's a question, all right? So the person, assuming they're being honest, they're not making a statement, they're asking what? A question. Does everybody see the difference between saying, Paul wrote 1 Timothy, that would be a what? Statement. And who wrote 1 Timothy? Somebody here in this one is asking what? A question. All right, what about the second one? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church.
It's a command or imperative.
That's an imperative. That's a command. Okay? So these are non-statements because the first one is a question and the second one is a command. Now, I'll say this. It's been my experience. You guys can tell me if you agree or disagree. Some people really are making a statement or intending to make a statement when they ask a question. They're making a statement, but they're couching it behind a what? A question. I think people do this from time to time. In other words, their question is maybe not sincere. And part of what you might need to have to do sometimes is to discern whether or not somebody is being sincere. Now, let's talk about that. When has somebody in this class possibly encountered somebody asking a question that you perceived to be more of a statement than a question?
It's happened before.
What's that?
It's happened before.
Yeah, it's happened before, and so you sort of know it when you hear it, but for me to ask you to recall it here off the cuff is probably not really fair. But you understand what I'm saying, right? So technically, these are non-statements because the first one is a question and the second one is a command. All right? Now, so the first sentence is a question and consequently has no truth value. It's not stating anything. It's not claiming anything. If the person is being sincere in asking the question, they're asking it because they don't know and they want to know the truth value of the statement, right? So the first sentence is a question and consequently has no truth value. It is neither true nor false and therefore is not a statement. So because it has no truth value, we understand that therefore it is not a what? A statement. Okay? Any questions? Amy hit it on the head. The second sentence is a command. And it also has no truth value because it is not a statement. It's a command. So, do the scriptures command you to do a lot of things in imperative mood? Set your affection on things above, for example. That's a command. That's an imperative. That's not a question. That's not a statement. It's a command. That's Paul's charging the believer there with regard to that. Okay? So we've got statements and we've got non-statements. Before we move on to the next point, does anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, so a good test of trying to figure out if this is a statement or not is to just ask, what does this person want me to believe is true? So that can help with the questions that are, or statements that are disguised as questions. If you ask, what does this person want me to believe is true, even though they asked a question and you can figure out this is what they want me to believe, then it's probably a statement in disguise. Whereas husbands, love your wives, if I ask, what do they want me to believe is true, I see no, it's more of what do they want me to do. So a command is going to tell you to do something, a question is going to ask for information, but if it's a true statement, I'm going to have something in there that person wants me to believe.
So what did you say just now about the question? You said the command is to do something, the question is to know something?
Right.
Okay, that's good.
What do they want me to know? What do they want me to do? What do they want me to believe?
So I think that's good. What do they want? What am I supposed to do versus what am I supposed to know? So Nate, do you have by chance an example of where someone has asked you a question and you perceived that they were not really asking a question but more making a statement?
I mean, pretty much anytime we interact with people in the comments section where they don't agree with us, a lot of the questions are really leading questions that are trying to get a jab in rather than
Gotcha questions.
right, gotcha questions rather than like, hey, I legitimately want to know what your thought is on this. And that's where you would figure that out is, do they want me to believe something or are they actually asking for information they don't have?
Yeah. Thanks for that. Anybody else want to interject?
Would it be fair to say that question thing would be something that Christ would do to the Pharisees a few times?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul uses rhetorical questions a lot when he writes. You know, it is a tool of teaching, right? I'm not sure we're talking about that element of it right now, but I see what you're saying. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. Where, you know, that one thing that's coming to mind is that exchange where he asks for the piece of money, and he says, whose head is on this? And they say Caesar, and he uses it to he is sort of asking a question, but it's leading to a teaching opportunity. Obviously, you can do that.
Yeah, that's cross-examination usually in a debate. So you ask very simple questions that have either a yes or no answer or an obvious answer, like everybody can look at it and say that's Caesar. So they're not going to say any other answer but the answer you want them to give.
So if you've ever watched a formal debate, almost every formal debate that I've ever watched enters into a period of what they call direct cross-examination, where the one opponent gets to ask direct questions of the other, and according to the rules of debate, they're supposed to answer, not pontificate. That's what you're getting at, I think.
Yeah, very direct answers.
Okay, so we got statements and we've got non-statements. The other thing we have is nonsense statements. Okay? So, how would we look at this? There is another kind of sentence that requires a little more care. It has the form of a statement. So it might appear to be what? A statement. But it is not a real statement. The instrument used to determine this is whether the sentence, again, has a truth what? So again, we keep coming back to this. What is the truth value of the statement? So if you're in your notes, you go to top page 2. Okay? So I got an example here. The round square sweetly kicked the green yesterday. The round square sweetly kicked the green yesterday. So quick talk to somebody next to you. What's wrong with the statement?
The round square. Squares can't kick anything. What's green?
All right, so Eli, you might as well take it. What is the issue here? What's wrong with the statement? Well, there's many things wrong here, but let's just break it down.
Something round can't be square.
Okay, stop there. So we got a problem here with a round what? Square. So what's the problem there? Think about what we've already talked about in previous lessons. Is there a definitional problem here?
Yes.
What's the definitional problem?
Round
Okay,
and
square and round aren't the same, right? A square by definition is four angles, four equal sides, right? A circle has a different definition. So is a round square an impossibility? Okay, let's keep going. The round sweetly kicked the green yesterday.
round squares can't feel emotions.
Okay, so a square, round square doesn't exist, but an inanimate object has no ability to feel what?
Sweet emotion.
Emotion, right? We're assuming that. But what about the problem here with kicked?
They don't have legs either.
They don't have legs. They don't have the ability to perform the verb of kicking something. Okay, and this is just distraction. None of this matters about the green yesterday because none of the stuff before that makes any what? Any sense. Okay, so this is what we would call a nonsense statement. Now, it looks like a statement. Is it structured like a statement? The round square sweetly kicked the green yesterday. It looks like a statement, but is it a statement? So again, why is it not a statement? It has no what? It has no truth value, right? It's not going to fit. It doesn't hold together, right? So this looks like a statement, but it cannot even be said to be false. It does not refer to anything. It is best described as nonsense. We can't even say it's a false statement because it doesn't make any sense at all. It's absolute what? Nonsense. It's foolish. It doesn't make any sense, right? So it's a nonsense statement. But is it structured like a statement? It's not a question. It's not a command. It looks like a statement, but is it a statement? It's not a statement, okay? Because it's gobbledygook. It's nonsense. It's meaningless. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
So again, if you ask that question, what does this person want me to believe is true? And then you say that of this sentence here, well, do they want me to believe that squares can be round? Do they want me to believe that squares can be sweet? Do they want me to believe that squares can kick something or do something yesterday? Like, I don't even know what to address in this statement because there's so many different things that I would have to. So a good statement is going to have one thing basically they want you to believe in that statement. Where if I ask of that and now I'm confused, that's where you're going to end up like, okay, this must be nonsense because I have so many options of what I'm supposed to deal with.
Right. So again, the question is, what are they asking me to what? Believe. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in here?
They probably want you to check them into a mentalist.
It almost sounds like a saying, because I got golf almost out of that. They didn't have square in it.
Well, I don't want to tell you where. Okay.
So it's something I would say.
So my brain wants to make it make sense, right?
Of course.
So the word round is the only one that I couldn't justify in that because okay, I have children. My children watched the Wiggles. They had dancing shapes and all kinds of stuff. So you could justify that the square is like a children's character that sweetly kicks up. I don't know. My brain wanted it to make sense.
Well, and
But it doesn't.
but I think that's a good point to draw out is that a lot of times do we subconsciously fill in blanks and fix things that really we should not. We all do this, okay? Because do you know logically that doesn't make sense? So you try to, your brain tries to go to the place where it figures it out and fixes it, right? So I totally understand what you're saying. It's sort of like, trying to give you an example of what it might be like. So, Alexander the Great, for example, he would, before going to battle, he would go to the Oracle of Delphi and ask the Oracle and say, Oracle, will I win the battle? And the Oracle would say, never say yes or no. The Oracle would say something like, yes, red sky in the morning. Why would the Oracle never say yes or no? He didn't know. And if he says one thing and it happens the opposite, now the Oracle has no what? Credibility. So he gives some nonsense statement that's totally subject to what? Interpretation. Okay? Anybody else before we move on?
Sometimes referred to as a word salad.
Yeah. True. So a little more on nonsense. Okay? So let's talk about this example here. Okay? I'll throw this up as well. Okay. Here's an example. This statement, this sentence is false. So talk to somebody next to you. What's wrong with that statement? This sentence is false.
Which sentence are they referring to?
This one here.
Yeah, well,
This one.
That sounds like another nonsense.
Okay, if it's nonsense, why is it nonsense?
the word "this" is not telling you which sentence. I mean,
Well, it's this one right here. Okay, so why is it nonsense then?
It has no truth
Not
value.
implying anything.
What's that?
Well, it is implying that it's false.
This sentence is false. It's
false.
Yeah.
okay. Anybody else?
Has no truth value.
Why does it? Okay, why does it have no truth value?
it's lacking completeness.
Okay,
It's not,
Well,
no
it's a
substance.
complete sentence.
it is a complete sentence.
It doesn't define anything.
Okay, so
Why give a statement?
It defines that the sentence is false.
it what?
It defines that the sentence is false, so.
It's stating that. Okay. Do we have any way to measure whether or not that's true or not?
No.
Okay, so let's go to the notes. If this is true, okay? If this is true, then it is false and therefore true. Right? If it's false, it is therefore true and consequently false. So
It's a self-defeating.
it's self-defeating. I'm going to write this here. SD, self-defeating. That's what SD stands for, self-defeating. If something is self-defeating, what does it mean?
It proves itself wrong.
It defeats itself. It proves itself wrong, right? It's like saying this sentence is not in English. What's wrong with that? It is in English. So is it meaningless? Okay, it's like when somebody says that all truth is relative. If somebody says all truth is relative, that would have to include what? The truth of that statement, which is therefore then self-defeating. Okay? So this is a nonsense statement. It's self-defeating. It's what I teach my students in my philosophy class, that it's SD, not standard definition, self-defeating. Okay? So, in other words, it defeats itself. So let's look at the next point. Again, there is no real truth value here. That's what some of you were struggling with. It's like you knew something wasn't right and that it was off, but it was hard to maybe put your finger on exactly what it was, right? So again, the problem here is that we're devoid of truth value in that statement. This sentence cannot be identified as either true or false. It is therefore not a statement. At least not the kind of statement that we can legitimately use in logic. It's self-defeating. It's SD. It's not going to work. There's all sorts of things like this. It's the same thing as saying something like, I don't exist. What's the problem with that? Do I have to exist in order to deny my existence? So that's self-defeating, right? So it's nonsense, in other words, would be a way to put that, okay? So here's a caution, though. Okay? Ridiculously false statements such as, the queen is a man, or dogs grow two heads when tickled, are not nonsense. Okay? They have a truth value, and the truth value that they have is what? False. Okay? So they are statements. So you do have to be careful here. Just because something sounds crazy and outlandish doesn't automatically mean it's nonsense and not a statement. That's why you have to think carefully about what's going on when you hear people talk. What are they claiming? What are they asserting? And is it valid or not? Is it true or not? Is what we're after here. Okay? Any comments there before we move on to the next point? So, let's just end this first half with the summary statement here and then some practice. Okay? So again, it's just a summary statement of what we've seen in the first half of the lesson. A statement is a sentence that is either true or false. Okay? It's either true or false. Other kinds of sentences that have no truth value, such as questions, commands, and nonsense, they are not statements. Okay? So, I've got some practice ones built into the lesson here. Okay? So, just quickly, so with somebody next to you, I want you to go through these. I'm not going to put them on the screen yet. We'll talk about the answers. You're discerning. Is it a statement? Is it a command? Is it nonsense? Or is it a question? So write your answer there on the line next to each one of those, and then we'll talk about them here in a second. So talk to somebody next to you for each one of these, starting with Jesus healed blind men, and work your way through those 5 or 6 examples there, and then we'll talk about the answers here in a second. Your 4 choice options are up here underlined. They're either a statement, a command, a question, or nonsense. Eli's that kid in school who's like brutally honest about it. Mr. Ross, this is dumb. We good? Anybody need more time? Okay, 30 more seconds. All right, let's talk about the first one, okay? Jesus healed blind men. Is this a statement, a command, nonsense, or a question? Who thinks it's a statement? Are we all in agreement? Okay, that's a statement. Okay? Second one. David was the first king of Israel. It's a statement, but it's what? False. Who was the first king? Okay, so it's a statement, but it has no truth value because it's what? False. Okay? Third example. Who wrote Hebrews? What's that one? Question. Okay? Next one. The Great Pyramid is 6 feet high. The Great Pyramid is 6 feet high. Okay, now we have some disagreement. Who thinks it's nonsense? Who thinks it's a statement?
Depends who made it.
Who thinks it's a false statement?
It's a false statement.
It's a false statement. It is a statement, but it's what? False. The Great Pyramid is much bigger than what? 6 feet high. I don't know the exact height, but it's taller than 6 feet.
Like that, the Great Pyramid is 6 feet high, but somebody could be referring to the Great Pyramid in miniature scale is 6 feet high. If you get,
I mean,
Context is.
Obviously these statements have no other context other than the statement, but if you just take the statement for what it is, I see what you're saying, and you are right about that. Here's my favorite one. The slithy toes did gry the gimbal. Nonsense.
Very Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I like that. It's me at my attempt at it's me speaking in tongues right there. And the last one, children obey your parents. What's that? It's a command.
That's an opinion.
Okay, so we understand the difference there then. Okay, let me see. I thought I had a blank one in here. So let me do this before we go any further. One of the things I teach, I'm going to write this up here. You guys can write this on your margin somewhere. Knowledge equals properly, justified, true belief. This is a standard definition of knowledge in a lot of formal philosophy and philosophical and logic textbooks. Okay? So this is saying that in order for you to have knowledge, knowledge equals something specific. So let's start at the end here. Okay? We'll start at the end with belief and work our way backwards. So in order for me to have knowledge, I first have to what? Believe something. Okay? It's kind of like shooting a basketball, right? I shoot the ball in order to what? Score. If I put it through the hoop, do I score points? Okay? Now, every shot I take, do I score? No. Okay? Sometimes, I mean, if I can hit a 3-pointer at 45%, am I an elite shooter? If every time in baseball, if I can get a hit 3 times out of 10 and bat 300, am I a good batter? Okay? So you understand, every belief you have, does everything you believe automatically true? No. Okay? So in order for you to have knowledge, you start with belief. So can I believe that 2 + 2 = 5? I can believe that. But it's not what? It's not true, right? So I can believe anything I want. I can believe Mike over here is a green Martian if I want. Okay? And, I could really believe this. I could make t-shirts and build a website, and we could sell shrines to Mike the Great Green Martian, and we can really believe this. I mean, really believe it, right? But just because we really believe it doesn't make it true.
You want to mess them up a little bit?
The answer is obviously, go ahead, Nate, what?
Can I have knowledge that you believe 2 + 2 = 5?
I mean, you could if you want, but I don't believe that, so.
Right, but let's say you did, and I knew that. Would it be knowledge, even though you're believing something false?
You could have knowledge of my false belief, yes. So the belief then has to be what? True. It's kind of what we've been talking about here with these statements, right? The belief, in order to equal knowledge, the belief has to be what? True. And then we could get into what proper justification means, but the point is, in order for knowledge to exist, are there certain things that must be true? Otherwise, we have no ability to factually communicate with anybody about anything, and all logical communication would break down, right? So, in order for you to have knowledge, everybody starts with believing things. I have believed things in my life that have turned out not to be what? True, because when I sought out to justify those beliefs, I realized that I was believing something that was what? False. And when I realized that what I was believing was false, what rational people do is they get rid of what? False beliefs. Does that make sense? Okay, anybody got any questions about that?
Right, so that's dealing with now what's reasonable.
Yeah.
So the properly justified has to do with what is reasonable, and that's really what we're getting at in the logic classes. How do we properly justify beliefs? Everybody has beliefs. So how do we justify those beliefs?
Right. Okay, so self-supporting, this should be edited. We're only going to look at self-supporting statements, not supported statements in the rest of this lesson. So, Once we have determined that a sentence is a statement, a further distinction can be made between self-supporting statements and supported statements. Okay? This is what we do in logic. We have to be slow and methodical and categorize everything so that everything makes sense. The distinction depends upon the means by which the truth value of the statement is determined. So this is important. Here we're looking at what? Means. How are we determining what? The truth value. That gets into sort of what I just said about proper justification, right? Self-supporting statements, which are statements that have immediately apparent truth values. Okay? In other words, by just understanding the statement, do you understand that what is being stated is true? Let me give you an example here. Okay? Any surface that is red is colored. Any surface that is red is colored. Is that true?
Yes.
How do we know?
Because red is a color.
Because red's a color. If the surface is red, then the surface must be what? Colored because red is a color. Okay? Nate, if there's anything here you want to chime in on, let me know.
You might have to define that term colored, though, because colored could imply that it has been colored.
Right, you could change it to has color.
Has color, is colored.
Has color.
Yeah. But the claim is that any surface that is red is colored. If a surface is red, has it obviously been colored? Or does it possess color? Okay. So, statements, this is important. Statements such as this, guys, are what we could also call self-evident statements. Just understanding the nature of what's being said tells you that it's what? True. The claim is self-evident. It's obvious, self-supporting, self-evident. It's obvious that it's the case with a statement such as this. Okay? Anybody else want to comment there?
No, that's a good point, Amy, because yeah, that's one of the things I thought too, like somebody could have colored on it with a crayon, but if you ask that, then yeah, that's where you define your term better and say, okay, it has the property of redness. Any surface that is red has the property of redness. That would be defining it, but it's still self-evident and obviously true immediately.
Yeah. So, moving on. For self-evident statements, we do not, that's a key, do not need to consider information outside of the statement to determine their truth values. It is obvious, it is apparent. So I don't need to spend 10 years in a lab studying the properties of the color red to know that that was a true statement. I understand that it's true by virtue of understanding the statement. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things in your life that you're going to encounter that are not necessarily self-evident. But some things are. Does that make sense? So, there are three types of self-supporting statements that we need to be aware of. All right? The first one is what we would call self-reports. And this is defined as a statement by a person concerning his or her own desires, beliefs, or feelings. So back to what I said earlier in the lesson. When I said I'm feeling warm right now, was that a self-reporting statement? I was expressing my own personal what? Feeling of feeling what? Warm. So I'm just self-reporting. I'm in the state of feeling angry. I'm in the state of being tired. I'm in the state of being upset. I don't know, whatever, happy, whatever. Okay? They're self-reporting. It's a statement by a person concerning his or her what? Own. Okay? So is anyone in this room right now happening to feel cold? One person. Okay? So it's self-reporting. All right? So, example. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Now this one, notice that what's giving this one away is what?
Believe.
I believe. So in this statement, is this a self-reporting statement? Now, it also happens to be true, according to my belief, but we'll set that aside for a minute. It's self-reporting. The person is saying that they are of the belief that Jesus is who? The Son of God. So it's self-reporting in that sense. The person is saying what they personally believe. Okay? So statements that refer to the belief of the speaker, okay? It does not primarily refer to whether Jesus is in fact the Son of God. In other words, the statement could be taken as true even if Christianity were false. Now, don't misunderstand me. I don't believe Christianity is false, and I believe Jesus is the Son of God, right? So, let's say, could somebody believe, I believe that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger? Could they say that? When they do that, are they self-reporting what they believe? And I could reject that because I don't believe that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Okay, you follow what I'm saying, right? So, before we move on, does anybody have any questions about this type of statement?
So, with a self-report, you give the person the benefit of the doubt and assume it true. So when somebody says, I believe Jesus is the Son of God, you don't say, false, I don't think you believe that. So this is something that probably for most married couples goes wrong in arguments. When somebody says, I didn't mean it that way, I intended X. And you're like, no, you didn't. You wanted to be mean. So with self-reports, we assume that they're telling us the truth, unless we have really good reason to believe they're lying.
So for example, if I encounter a Muslim and I ask them what they believe, and they say, I believe that that there's no God but Allah, Muhammad is his prophet, do I have to take at face value that that is what they believe? Yeah. Then we get into a conversation about whether that's a true what? True statement or a true belief. But they are reporting, they're self-reporting what they think is what? True. Okay? So, real quick, brainstorm on your page there. Come up with a couple. Can you think of any additional self-reporting statements?
I like pizza.
All right, does anybody have one they want to share? Anyone have a self-reported statement that you want to throw out as an example that you came up with? Amy, is your hand up?
Well, I know there's been books and movies and stuff where people have these near-death experiences. They say they went to heaven and came back, and they're telling people all about it.
So the statement there would be, I believe I died and went to heaven and came back, or something like that. So that's a self-reported statement of something they believe happened to them. Okay? Yeah.
What about the teacher that had a student that thought he was a cat and he had to accept that?
Okay, but now we're getting way beyond just the statement.
Okay.
If somebody says, I believe I'm a cat,
Yeah.
they are self-reporting what they believe about themselves, assuming they're being honest. Getting into secondarily my need to have to accept that as true is a whole different ballgame. But if somebody believes they're a cat, then they are self-reporting by saying, I believe I'm a cat. Even though I'm sitting here saying, no, you're not. Yeah.
I believe school is pointless.
Yes. You can believe anything you want, David. Doesn't make it true. No, I'm just kidding.
What's the differentiate, like, when you make statements and then opinions?
Well, this could be I would say this is kind of the same thing. Nate, what do you want to add?
Self-reports are oftentimes
Opinions.
I think
Is that just a synonym?
Right.
Yeah, like I believe that Papa John's pizza is better than Hungry Howie's. That's my opinion.
Statement, but.
It is, yeah,
Your
it is
opinion. Your opinion.
It happens to be true, but we'll leave that aside.
I had one of those written down too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said, I think dogs are better than cats.
Right. That's an opinion. It happens to be true, but it's an opinion. So, does everybody get the point here? Okay, so a second type of self-supported statement is what we call a tautology. Okay, and this is a statements that are true or false by logical structure. Okay, so true or false by logical structure. I'll give you an example in a minute. Okay, that is a statement that can be seen to be true or false by how the sentence is put together. Okay, so I believe dogs are better than cats. That's an opinion, right? So what are we talking about here? Example: Jesus is the Son of God, or he is not the Son of God. This is a tautology. Why?
You're posing two options.
And there are, how many more options would be?
How many more options would there be? Logically. None. Right? So is this a complete statement as far as its scope of information that we need to take in to evaluate it? Okay? So we would say that this is a tautology. This statement is necessarily true. Okay? It cannot be false because it covers all of the possibilities. Either Jesus is God or what? He's not. A statement which is true by logical structure is called a tautology. Okay? Any questions?
So we use these all the time, right? Either I'm right or I'm not. Or it'll happen or it won't. So just let it go.
Yes or yes?
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
It'll happen or it won't.
Either it'll rain or it won't. I mean, you could do this forever, right? And because those are the only options, it's like, it's not like going to kind of, I mean, it might rain for a while, then quit. But if you're waking up at 6 a.m. and you say, today it's either going to rain or it's not, well, it's sort of like the Oracle of Delphi. You're either going to win the battle or what?
Right.
No.
Yeah, so if you want to be right all the time, try to make your statements tautologies as much as possible.
But we should also say that's true. What Nate just said is true, but like, are you really saying anything?
What about the
You're not taking a stand for anything. You're just being sort of uncommitted.
Where does the answer maybe come in?
Well, that would be a lack of knowledge then, right? If I don't know, so if I said Jesus is the Son of God, or he's not the Son of God, or I'm not sure if he is or is not, the I'm not sure is not a statement of he is or is not where I can value the truth. Now it's a self-report, I don't know.
You see that? See how you add another level in there? So if you take that and you say, how did you say that, Nate? What should I add here?
I don't know if he is or is not.
Well, I mean, Jesus is the Son of God or he is not the Son of God. Maybe. How would that, if somebody answers maybe?
Well, yeah, then you go back to the original laws.
You would go back and say, well, this statement would not support that. It would not support a maybe answer. That's why to me agnosticism is a joke. Okay? What an agnostic is a functional atheist. An atheist says there is no God. A theist says God exists, right? An agnostic says, well, I'm not sure.
There's two options. He either does or he doesn't.
So like somebody could plausibly be agnostic temporarily, but they cannot be permanently agnostic. They might as well just be an atheist then.
I'd rather have an atheist.
Okay? You see what I'm saying? Like, there might be plausibility for somebody to take a position like that for a limited period of time while they think it through, but they cannot remain in that sort of an undecided state perpetually. You follow that? Okay? So I got a few minutes left here. So, in contrast, other statements are necessarily true. So here's some contrast. Jesus is the Son of God, and he is not the Son of God. What's wrong with that statement?
Self-contradictory.
Very good, David. It's self-contradicting. It contradicts itself. Okay? So, is it true then? Can't be true because it's self-contradictory. Okay? So, this is an example of a self-contradiction, a statement that is false by logical structure. Because the two halves of the statement, okay, Jesus is the Son of God, and he is not the Son of God, do these two halves contradict each other? So we would say, therefore, that it's what? The truth value of that statement has to be what? False. Okay? Everybody with that? So, then last one we have on page 4, we're on page 4, I guess, is definitional. Some statements are necessarily true or false because of the definitions of the words in the sentence. This goes back to that square, circle square thing earlier in the lesson. Okay? So here's an example here. All triangles are three-sided figures. Is that correct? Is that true? Why is that true? Definition of a triangle, three angles, three what? Three sides. Okay? So we understand that that's the definition. So we could say that this is necessarily true, and we understand that it is true by definition of what triangles are. Okay? You could further say, the following is false. This triangle is an octagon. Is that going to work? No, it's not going to work any more than the square circle at the beginning of the lesson. It's not going to work, right? And the reason it's not going to work is because, according to the definitions of triangle and octagon, the statement is necessarily false. It doesn't make sense. Okay? So
where do differing definitions of words play in then?
So I would say then, in these examples, it's pretty obvious because we're talking about set geometry and what the definitions of an octagon, a triangle, and a square are and all that, right? So that's where you're going to have to do the definitional work to make sure you understand how somebody is using the definition. I used the example a couple weeks back of abortion. We've used other examples where people aren't even talking about the same thing. So you're going to have to then maybe do some probing to find out, okay, how are you defining that word? How are you using that word and what context are you using it in? It's like the word inspiration. People throw, it's a Bible word. All scripture is given by inspiration of God, but I've realized real quick that when you talk to people about inspiration, they're not always talking about the same thing. They might have their own view on it, and then you've got to settle what these definitional meanings are before you can make any progress in any kind of a conversation. Because somebody could be, let's see, Nate brought it up, I think it was last week. Well, the word trunk. You brought this up, didn't you? What's a trunk? Could be a tree, part of a tree, could be a part of an elephant, could be part of your body, could be the back end of a car, could be the case that you put your valuables in at the end of the bed. Like there's 5 or 6 things that you could be referring to when you talk about a trunk, right? But in a statement like this triangle is an octagon, are we talking about pretty specific things?
I don't know what an octagon is, but
That's not wrong?
So it's gotta be a word that has to be described. That's considered
Touché.
That's considered a word that has to be described.
I didn't hear all
trunk.
Yeah, trunk you'd have to, okay, what kind of trunk are we talking about? And then once we settle on what we mean by trunk, then can we apply a definition and see if it makes sense? But you're going to have to, David's right, you'd have to go through that prior step. Okay? So to close it off, a summary statement regarding this point. Self-supporting statements are statements for which we need no outside evidence to determine their truth value. So we don't need anything outside. We just understand the statement, whether it's true or not, by self-evident. Okay, I use that word again here. There are three types: self-reports, self-evident, statements that are true or false by logical structure, that would be the tautology, and statements that are true or false by definition. Okay? So what have we seen in this lesson? We've looked at the nature of statements, and then we've looked at a particular kind of statements that we've called self-supporting statements. Now there are other statements that you could make that are not self-supported, that are not self-reporting, that are not true or false tautologies, or statements that are false by definition, that you're going to need to now marshal some support for the statement. We would call those supported statements, and Nate's going to get into that next week. Okay? So anybody got any questions or comments here before it's 10 o'clock right on the nose?
I have a statement I remember hearing when I was in school, and somebody said, just to mess you up, but the statement goes, how long is a Chinaman?
How long what?
Is a Chinaman. And being as kids, how long is a Chinaman? Well, I don't know how long a Chinaman is. But is that a question? Could be, how long is a Chinaman? That's his name. How long is a Chinaman? So when you look at that statement, it depends on how are you asking a question? Are you stating how long, how many inches, or how long?
That's what we're doing.
That's it would depend on how that question, if it's written down, how it's
Period or question mark.
Question marks, capitalized and stuff.
Right, yeah, punctuation would matter.
But just to say, just come out, just come out and say that statement.
What you're referring there kind of reminds me of that I remember, you remember being a kid, and somebody would have a new toy, and you'd say, can I see it? And they'd say, you see with your eyes, not with your hands. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay? So, is it true that you see with your eyes, not with your hands?
Unless you're blind.
Unless you're blind, it's a true statement, right? But to really understand what something is, an object is, do you have to handle it? In many cases. Okay? So I don't want to get too far into the weeds here at the end, but you understand. So what Nate's going to do next week is he's going to pick this up, and he's going to go through supported statements, or statements for which you are going to need to offer what? Support or proof or evidence. Okay?
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
Super quick. I've been stuck on it. I thought it was going to get clear, and then it didn't. In the first section, we've got the definition of a statement, but then the last bullet point says that if the statement has no truth value, then it's not a statement at all. But yet, we're still saying that it's a statement. So did I just read that wrong, or am I being too literal?
Truth value can mean both true and false. So it's your truth value is whether or not it is telling you something that could be true or could be false. And it's so not it. With some of these statements, non-statements like the nonsense. Let's see, what's a good one here? Like the round squares sweetly kicked the green yesterday. It has no truth value because we can't really tell if it's a true or false statement. Okay. Because it's nonsensical. It has no truth value. I can't test it and say, no, it's actually false. They're wrong. Or yes, it's true. They're correct because it's nonsensical. I can't determine that. So we would